Movement in Valorant is one of the most important aspects of the entire game, even more important than your raw aiming ability. But why? First of all, good movement will make you a harder target to hit, which is why you will typically see pro players and higher elo players strafing every time they take a shot and committing to crouch sprays less often than you do in low elo. Making yourself a harder target to hit actually makes it easier for you to get fragged, since it gives you more time to adjust your crosshair onto the target. This is typically why low elo players are always surprised when a smurf instantly headshots them. It's not that the smurf is insanely good at the game, they're not, it's just easier to hit a shot on someone with bad movement. When peeking an angle, lower ranked players will typically either be holding their W key or even peeking diagonally, all while exposing themselves to a ton of different angles. This makes it harder for you, since not only are you an easier target to hit, but it also means that you will need to make a huge flick to actually get a frag, and if you rely on hitting an insane flick all the time, you are probably very inconsistent. Aiming and movement go hand in hand together, which is a concept people don't really understand. Let's say I was on attack and I wanted to take a site. Would you A, just wide swing and try to panic flick onto the enemy? Or would you B, clear every single angle individually using good crosshair placement and your A and D keys instead? When you micro your movement and you isolate every angle individually while also having good crosshair placement, the aiming is done by your movement most of the time. Meaning if you have good crosshair placement and good movement, you should in most cases not need to move your mouse at all to get a frag. Or if you do need to move it, it should be a very micro horizontal movement instead. And if you're like me and you don't have time to be stuck in the kitchen cooking meals because you're busy grinding Valorant, you need to check out Factor 75. They cut out the stressful meal planning and prepping so your meals come together in minutes. And they offer meals for keto, low calorie, vegan, and vegetarian lifestyles. And they also allow you to hit your daily nutrition goals with great ingredients that are dietitian approved. And they've got over 27 meal options each week, so there's something for everyone. And you can get a range of 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can add or reduce the number or even modify food preferences or even skip the week if you need. I'm currently eating a Factor 75 meal right now while recording this video, and it saved me like an hour of time. So get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life using my link. That means you can choose 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you are an active subscriber. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone today. Now that you understand why movement is important to be a consistent player and a good aimer, we need to talk about how to make yourself a harder target to hit. Typically, you will see at any medium to long range fight in high elo, players are burst strafing. This is when you strafe in one direction, stop your movement, shoot a burst, and as soon as you shoot, continue your movement in the opposite direction. And you repeat this process until you get the frag. There's a very slight window where you can stop, shoot, and continue movement, making it appear as you are always a moving target and also making it harder for an enemy to hit you. Another common thing you don't see too often is anti-crosshair placement. This is a part of game sense, but it's also a part of movement in my opinion. Knowing how to position yourself on an angle where an enemy typically wouldn't have their crosshair pre-aimed will allow you to typically catch them off guard, giving you an advantage in the fight. Meaning instead of taking a typical 50-50 duel, it would be more like a 70-30 duel in your favor. A great example of this is instead of peeking a main on ascent on the on angle or the common angle, which everyone will typically be pre-aiming, instead you could be wide against the wall, so if an enemy fails to clear it correctly, you instantly get a free frag. And this concept is especially strong if you're playing Reyna, Jett, or Chamber, so you can get out of there with zero trade potential. Next, let's talk about jump spotting. This is a very common concept to allow for you to play passively and get information while also making yourself a harder target to hit. Some common places you'll see jump spotting are in Hell on Ascent to spot the A main walkout, or back B site on Bind to spot into Hookah, or even A main on Lotus occasionally. This allows for you to get info for your team and then reposition or use utility to delay their push as your team rotates in to help you. Now let's talk about jump peeking, which is something people either don't know how to do correctly or they don't know how strong it is. This is typically why players in the lower ranks think that the operator is a broken weapon, due to not only poor utility usage but also not abusing jump peeks. Using jump peeks is very strong for not only information, but it can also be strong for baiting an operator shot. and then swinging right after they miss. You'll commonly see jump peeking to bait a shot, which gives away the enemy's position and also allows you to avoid spectating your team for the next minute. Now let's talk about jiggle peeking. The main reason to jiggle is to either bait an enemy to take a shot, which is very strong in post-plant situations if they tap the spike, but it can also be used to condition an enemy to adjust their aim to hold the angle tighter in an attempt to get the frag on you. This is why you'll see people like Poppin jiggle an angle prior to going super wide. He conditions the player into thinking he's going to keep jiggling them, so they adjust their crosshair to hold tighter and then decides to do the widest peek in the world, which catches them off guard. Now, many people on Valorant think that crouching is inherently bad, but if that was the case, why would pro players like Durkee crouch anyways? Well, that's because it's only bad if you're using it incorrectly. Crouching can actually be good if you're either holding an off angle and throwing off an enemy's crosshair placement by changing where your head level is, or in an isolated 1v1 fight. The big mistakes players make when crouch spraying is committing to a crouch spray at either too long of a distance where they should be burst strafing instead, or when there are multiple enemies on their screen, meaning that there is no way they do not get traded. So a great example of throwing off an enemy's crosshair placement with crouching would be if I was to be holding this angle in ropes on split, for example, and I was positioned in the corner to hold cross to be heaven. Any normal player swinging that would have their crosshair positioned directly at my head. But what if I was crouched holding this angle? Now they'd have to flick downwards to hit me while my crosshair placement is perfectly on them, giving me the advantage in the fight instead. Again, we are giving ourselves a 70-30 duel instead of a 50-50. Now let's talk about boosting. Boosting is when your teammates boost you onto angles that your agent typically couldn't get on. This is a pretty good way to position yourself onto an off angle and possibly catch the other team off guard. To do this, just stand in a corner and have your teammate crouch and hold W into you while you jump. And just like that, you've created an off angle on Phoenix. Or if you're playing an agent like Jett instead, you could technically just glide to a position yourself on top of truck on bind, for example, without the need to actually waste your updraft, which is especially helpful considering she only has one now. Another way I use movement on Icebox is if the enemy team is pushing B, I'll typically go across the rope and then jump off the rope onto their belt. This allows me to hold an aggressive off angle to stop their rotation, so if they try to come back to A, I have not only free info and free frags, I can also allow my team to 4-stack B and mid. Now let's talk about silent jumping. Certain areas on maps will make a sound cue if you jump onto the angle, letting an enemy know to pre-aim it, like aiming on ascent. But if you actually hit your shift key while jumping onto it, you will jump silently, giving them zero information that you have crossed to this off angle. You can use the same concept to silently drop down ropes faster, which actually can be pretty useful so that you aren't caught shift walking down a rope. Now I'll just mention some very niche movement tips. If you play Raze, you can use your blast pack to peek with it, so you get a very broken Ferrari peek, or you can also use it to double blast pack into sight, making you a harder target to hit. To double blast pack, just throw your satchels underneath you and detonate them after you've jumped in front of them, moving you across the map extremely fast. For Jett, you can updraft and dash into your own smoke on an entry, allowing for you to completely dodge cypher trips or killjoy mollies on an entry and making yourself a harder target to hit. And if you're one of the many Neon players, I got my boy Temet to tell you guys all of the movement tips you need to know for Neon.
Yo guys, Temet here, and I'm going to teach you guys Neon movement. Now the first thing you're going to do is go ahead and bind your jump to scroll wheel down. The main reason you want to do this is that it makes your jumping a lot more consistent, so you can do stuff like this. The first thing you want to learn when it comes to Neon movement is how to backslide. All you have to do is just sprint forward and then tap S and slide. It takes some time to get used to, but it's pretty easy. Another part of Neon movement is crouching while midair. If you didn't know this, you actually get a little bit of extra height when crouching, and that helps you keep your momentum on jumps like this right here. So if you try to do this jump normally without crouching, you won't keep your momentum. And as you can see, I just lose all my momentum. But if you crouch while midair, it'll look a little something like this. You can also get multiple slides while playing with Neon. If you have your ult available and your regular slide, you can do 2 slides back to back. Another big part of Neon movement is rope movement. And if you binded your jump to scroll wheel, it makes this a lot easier. Because all you have to do to get off the rope is just scroll wheel. And if you keep spamming scroll wheel while jumping on ropes, it'll look a little something like this. A good way to learn how to B-op consistently is to just jump in a line. and just timing your skill wheel jump as you go. And if you practice that, you'll be able to do it while sprinting around. To keep your momentum while doing neon movement, you have to do transitional strafes, which basically means you can't go from W to S without adding an A or D strafe. So make sure you use transitional strafes to make your movement fluid. If you want to get better at neon movement, you gotta put the time in.